So, I'm Connie from Faf Designs. I'm a furniture painter and I'm also a brand ambassador for Dixie Belle Paint. Every week I do a new furniture painting video. This week we're doing a little small wall shelf because as I speak I'm actually on holiday at the moment. So this one is just a short one this week. I recently bought myself a bright red toaster because why not? And I'm going to introduce some pops of red into my kitchen. This has been in my kitchen for quite a while, as you can tell from the grime that's on it. Don't judge me. So I'm going to paint this red and hopefully that can sort of tie in with the random red toaster purchase. As always, the first thing to do is to give your piece a really good clean. This was absolutely no exception because it was embarrassingly filthy. It's been in my kitchen for a while and I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever cleaned it. I'm not sure why I've just admitted that, but here we go. So I also decided to remove the handle. Probably should have done that to begin with, but I only decided as I was kind of going with it. So, and there was always one screw, isn't there? There was always one screw that doesn't want to come out. Then I rounded it off, annoyingly, and went in with numerous tools before basically it just pulled out. So that was pretty annoying. And if you do go in and remove your handles as an afterthought like I've done here, just make sure you go back in with your cleaner and remove anything that's trapped underneath that handle, because you'd be surprised how much grime can be trapped underneath those. Then I used Dixie mud in white just to fill the holes that I had created when I took the old handle off, and waited for that to dry. It dries really quickly actually, Dixie mud does, so I didn't have to wait long, and gave it a quick scuff sand all over just to get those holes smooth, and also just to kind of smooth out any rough bits on the rest of the shelf as well. The colour that I'm going to use on this shelf is called Honky Tonk Red, and it's from Dixie Belle's Chalk Mineral Paint line. I'm using a synthetic brush to apply this all over. It's my most favourite red in the world. It covers like an absolute charm, and red it's got a bit of a reputation for sometimes not being great coverage wise, but you can see how absolutely amazing that colour is covering. It's a real bright, punchy red colour and I love it. As you can see, I've not taken off those two little hooks on the bottom, mainly because of the pain that it was to take off the handle. And this is really, really cheap wood. I didn't want to risk damaging it and not being able to get those hooks back on. So for that reason, I'm leaving them. I'm going to paint over them a little bit and kind of make it look kind of rustic and intentional. So I've done the first coat of red on this little wall shelf that's down here, and if you are using a paintbrush that you know you will be needing for a second coat of the same colour, instead of washing that brush out and wasting time and energy and paint, what you can do is wrap it in some plastic. I've just got a sandwich bag, cling film or saran wrap as I believe that it's called over the pond. Make sure all the air is out of it, scrunch all the air out, secure it. I sometimes use a hair bobble just so that no air can get in. If you aren't going to be coming back to it sort of within the next couple of hours, pop it in the fridge, because that will again stop the bristles from drying out. If you're coming back to it relatively soon, I just leave mine out. This will be dry in absolutely no time at all and ready for the second coat, but that stops you having to wash your brushes out. So that handy little tip was brought to you by Faf Designs. And here I am taking my brush out of the bag and showing the world. There you go. The bristles are fine, the paint hasn't dried out, and it just stops you having to wash that paintbrush. So I'm going in with the second coat. Honky Tonk Red covers phenomenally well. Phenomenally? well. But I'm still going to do 2 coats. I'm a 2 coat kind of gal. Just make sure you've covered everything. You've got good coverage on there. And there we go. 2nd coat going on. What I'm also doing as well, as this paint dries, I'm also kind of dragging my paintbrush over the surface. Now, if you want a smooth finish, this is probably the worst thing you can do. But as you know, I love a bit of texture. I am kind of already digging the texture of this piece. It's quite a rustic piece anyway. That's the kind of style of it. And the wood is not completely smooth. So we're going with it. And I'm just kind of promoting that bit of texture by, as the paint is drying, just dragging my brush lightly over it, and that gives you a little hint of texture. Definitely not as much texture as it would do if I was using a natural bristle brush, but it still gives you a little subtle bit of texture. And I decided I wanted to add some detail to the front just to add a little bit of interest. So I cut up a section of the silkscreen stencil in the pattern Botanicals. I've used this before on the inside of a bureau and I really like it. And just because I have hardly got any sort of space either side of that stencil where I've cut it out, I'm just going to put some frog tape either side, just so that when I stencil, I'm not going to get any white paint over the stencil edge. I'm using a teeny tiny stencil brush just from a pack that I picked up off Amazon, and stencil brushes are normally natural bristle brushes, just because they lend themselves much better to stenciling than synthetic brushes. And I'm just tapping this through the stencil to give a kind of folky kind of look, I suppose. This stencil, I don't really know what kind of look it gives, but it just gives a little bit of detail. The important thing to remember when you are stenciling is that less is more. So you need very little paint on your brush. Now, silkscreen stencils are a little bit more forgiving than a standard stencil because they have an adhesive backing, which reduces the amount of bleed through that you have. So you can get away with using a little bit more paint, but not too much. I'm just making sure that that paint has gone all the way through the stencil and I haven't missed any pieces. And oh, the colour that I'm using here is Fluff. It's a really great coverage white, so I decided to use that. And moment of truth, yay, it's not too bad. I then turned it round and did the same stencil, but the kind of pattern going the opposite way. So the kind of leaves were facing the opposite way, if that makes sense. So it wasn't all going in one direction. You'll see what I mean when I pull the stencil off. So I let all of that thoroughly dry, and just kind of in keeping with the whole kind of rustic vibe and that kind of look that I love, I am going to distress this, and I'm using an old sanding sheet from a Festool, and I'm just kind of roughing up the edges of this shelf just to give it a little bit of character and interest. So the next thing is my favourite step, probably not for everybody, but it is for me, and that is to wax the piece. I absolutely love waxed furniture. It's my favourite finish, and I'm using Dixie Belle's Best Dang Wax in clear. It looks white in the tin, but it goes on clear. Well, it goes on a little bit hazy actually, but it buffs clear. And I am using the La Petite brush, which is a natural bristle brush. It's got a pointed end, so it's really good for getting in all those corners. So I'm just going to apply a layer of wax all over the piece and make sure it's got a decent coat on. Then you're going to leave it for about 20 minutes and then buff it dry with a microfiber cloth. This removes the excess and just gives it a really nice sheen. I'm going to add a little bit of dimension with some coloured waxes. So first I'm using Best Dang Wax in black, I'm using the French tip brush to apply this because you can see how well it fits in all those corners and crevices. So I love black wax over red paint. I love it. And basically when you add black wax, you're adding a little bit of depth and dimension, and you can also add age to a piece by adding black wax. I'm mainly using this in, like I say, the corners and sort of the edges, but I'm also using what the sort of remnants are on my brush just to kind of go around the edges of the drawer and kind of create a little bit of depth around there as well. You can use as much or as little black wax as you like, or whatever the kind of look is that you're going for. I have gone in with quite a lot of black wax. It's very heavily pigmented, so a little bit goes a long way. And the best thing about Best Dang Wax is that it's water-based. So if you really don't like what you've done, then you can easily remove it with a rag or a baby wipe. The reason that I always apply my clear wax first and then my coloured waxes after is that it gives you much greater control over the application of those coloured waxes. If you apply coloured wax straight onto painted furniture without a clear wax first, that wax grips onto the paint and it's much less easy to control where you want that wax. Say for example, if you wanted to remove any, or if you wanted to kind of wipe back and leave it in sort of any carved detail that you might have on your piece, it's much harder to do that without that clear wax first. It creates a barrier between the paint and the coloured waxes, just to give you that little bit of extra control. So you can see how easily this wipes back. I'm just going to take the excess of that black wax from around those little hooks on the bottom of the shelf, just because I don't want it quite so heavy in those areas. You can see I'm just using a dry microfiber cloth and I'm just wiping it back, and that's just going to leave a little bit more of a subtle finish. I'm going to use another coloured wax on this as well. I'm using Best Dang Wax in white. This time I'm using it with a Best Dang brush because it's flat. So the reason for that is it's going to give me a less concentrated application of wax. And I've taken the excess off on a microfiber cloth as well, just because I don't want this kind of too white. I just want to give it a more kind of faded look. So this is going to also age the piece, but in more of a kind of sun bleached way, instead of adding that kind of dirty or grungy look like brown and black wax can. White wax is a really good way to add age if you don't want to add those darker colours. Again, just removing the excess with the microfiber cloth and just kind of really building it up to how I want this to look. And you can layer this if you want a more subtle look. Just put a tiny amount on. Again, a little bit goes a long way of the white wax. If you wanted a much more kind of sun bleached effect, then you can use a heavier application if you wanted to. I thought I wanted a white handle on this, but as soon as I put it on, I realised it looked like a train. So I found a different colour handle and I like that one much better. So here's a couple of close-ups. I'm really glad I swapped that handle out. That was not a vibe at all. And I'm loving the final piece, and you'll be glad to know that it does match my toaster. Thank you for watching this short video this week. Normal content will be resumed next week when I'm back off my holidays. It's actually been really fun doing something a little bit smaller. Definitely love working in red. Honky Tonk Red is just the best. So I hope you liked it, and I've just staged it really simply with a cowboy hat and some plants. Bit random, but it works. So thank you for watching. Make sure you are subscribed to my channel and ring the notification bell.